მოგესალმებით მეგობრებო. დღეს ჩვენი სტუმარია ვერონის უნივერსიტეტის პროფესორი ბატონი კარლო ლოტერი, რომელიც ჩვენ გვესაუბრება საკითხზე, რომელიც ბოლო 2-3 წლის განმავლობაში ყველაზე დიდი თემა იყო მთელ მსოფლიოში. ეს საკითხი შეეხება COVID და მის გარშემო შექმნილ სიტუაციას, რომელიც მთავრობებმა თუ სამედიცინო დაწესებულებებმა შეუქმნეს მთელ ჩვენს საზოგადოებას, მთელ მსოფლიოში. მოგეხსენებათ, რომ ვითარება სხვადასხვა იყო სხვადასხვა ქვეყანაში, ზოგ ქვეყანაში უფრო მკაცრი შეზღუდვები იყო და მკაცრი კონტროლი ვითარების, მაგალითად იტალია იყო ერთ-ერთი მათგანი, სადაც ასეთი სიმკაცრე იყო, ზოგიერთ ქვეყანაში პირიქით და ახლა უკვე დადგა ის დრო, როდესაც ჩვენ უნდა ნელ-ნელა ვიმსჯელოთ, თუ რამდენად სწორად მოიქცა ესა თუ ის ქვეყანა, რამდენად სწორი იყო ესა თუ ის გადაწყვეტილება, ნელ-ნელა შევაფასოთ ის ქმედებები, რაც მაშინ მოხდა, რომელმა მოხდა ასე თუ ისე დადებით შედეგი და რომელმა უარყოფითი შედეგი. ან უფრო მეტად გაამწვავა სიტუაცია. თავდაპირველად, რა თქმა უნდა, ბატონი კარლო წარმოგიდგენთ თავის თავს. შემდეგ მოვიყვებათ იმის შესახებ თუ რა ზომები იქნა მიღებული იტალიაში, რომელზედაც ჩვენ ასე თუ ისე ყველანი ინფორმირებული ვართ ტელევიზიის საშუალებით და შემდეგ კი ჩვენ გავაგრძელებთ მსჯელობას. საუბარი რა თქმა უნდა წარიმართება ინგლისურ ენაზე და ინგლისური გესმით იმედი მაქვს თქვენს შთაბეჭდილებებს გაგვიზიარებთ. Please, Carlo.
Thank you for the invitation. As you said, I'm a professor of philosophy of law in the University of Verona. Unfortunately, I don't speak Cartuli language, so I'm forced to use my very poor English, but I'm sure the conversation will be interesting because the topic is very, very important. So in a different way, in Georgia and in Italy, we have been forced to face this new thing called pandemic. And obviously the government here and in Italy had a different reaction, different answers, but basically in Georgia, in Italy, everywhere we had, in my opinion, a radical change of the relationship between society and power with a lot of consequences. And because I am a classical liberal libertarian and consider that individual freedom is very, very important, and by consequence, I don't accept that someone claim the right to govern other people, because when we are governed by someone, we are not anymore free, we are controlled, we are directed, we are some way owned by who claim the right to govern you. I think it's very important everywhere to try to understand what happened during the pandemic age, because we are not out of this situation, really, because my opinion is that power changed and it still changed, so it's very difficult to come back the previous situation. In these 2 years, many times when I talked with my students, I suggested a book, because we have a lot of interesting book and booklets, and the book I suggested is a book written by an American scholar, an historian. The name of this scholar is Robert Hicks, and the title is Crisis and Leviathan. And the main argument of this book is that when you have a crisis, it can be a financial crisis, it can be a war, obviously, can be a problem of pandemic or something of different, a crisis. You have a wonderful opportunity for the power to extend its control over the society.
Its possibility to extend
exactly. Power. And in this sense, what we knew was a state of exception. It was called a state of exception. And when there is this exception, normal rules disappear. But the problem we experienced it in these years, we observed the decline of law and at the same time the increase of the power and the state, the government.
First of all, maybe it is better to remember how it was begun in Italy. So we have seen many things from TV and we know something about it, but you live there, so you'd say how it was in your point of view.
Italy is not the most important country in the world, absolutely not. Even in the West, is not. But in this specific story of the pandemic, Italy played a special role. Why? because it was the first Western country receiving in an important way the virus from China. And I remember January 2020, when at the TV we watched some scenes coming from China, and the control by the government of the society, the people impeded to leave home, etc. And I remember the reaction of journalists and opinion leaders in TV. They said, oh, they react in this way, it's very pressing for us, not acceptable, because they deny their rights, but it's very efficient in order to stop this pandemic. And their judgment usually was, unfortunately, we cannot do it because we are in a democracy. This was the beginning. But when the virus arrived, very, very soon, Italy copied the Chinese model. And when we copied the Chinese model, we create a precedent.
It's already no democracy there.
The individual right disappeared. It was impeded to leave home, to do activity, to work, to meet relatives, and so on. It was dramatic for Italy, but not very important. It was very for all, because we create a precedent. And many important leftist scholars from UK, for instance, said, we wanted to suggest it, but we believed at the beginning it was impossible in the West. And then we looked at Italy, and we realized it was possible. It was possible to cancel in one day all the individual rights. And it happened, in fact.
It's interesting. Only few countries was mostly accessed with like these rules. Italy, Spain, also it was New York.
In France, they adopted a very strict,
only few countries, and not all of them were. And how it is allowed by the people or by the government to have so big difference between these neighbor countries.
Yeah. Before you said that I teach in Verona, it's true, but I teach also in Lugano, and Lugano is a Swiss city.
Yeah.
So my point of view was interesting because I watched what happened in Italy, but the same in Switzerland. And obviously there was a big difference between the way Italian government treated our citizens, subjects, and what happened in Switzerland. But I have to add that with some nuance, with some difference, unfortunately, everywhere we observe a decline of individual liberty. Everywhere we had a kind of lockdown. Everywhere we had later.
In Switzerland too.
In Switzerland too. It's very interesting because also the autonomy of cantons very quickly disappear. Largely in Switzerland, the main decision came from Bern, from the capital, and not from the local government. And even when they stopped with this regulation, it was Bern which decided we have to stop this kind of regulation. Not so strict as in Italy or in France, but anyway. There were also some countries decided to choose another path, for instance Sweden, about lockdown. They rejected this idea to stop economic activity, etc. And probably it was very, very correct, because I remember, for instance, what happened in Italy during the lockdown. Lockdown was not total. It's impossible to have a total lockdown. For instance, as here, supermarkets were open, so people working in the supermarket didn't do lockdown. And I read an article after some months, at the end of lockdown, reporting that if you look the data of the people work during the lockdown and the people, the worker, forced to stay at home, we cannot see differences. In other terms, we have the diffusion of virus in the people who worked and the people forced to stop the work. So it was totally inefficient, in fact. This decision, it had a lot of terrible consequences of the economy, obviously, but anyway, we can also, right, there are many different, a very interesting case is the case of the United States, because there we have sometimes, I don't know, North Dakota, South Dakota, the same society more or less, and some different decision in one state or another state, so you can also look what
yes,
happened.
I remember it was difference between North Italy and South Italy too.
It depends, not in this sense, because at that time the region became quite important. So you can have in the south some region closer, very, very close, and other open, rejecting some. But basically, politicians, as in Georgia, as in other countries, in Italy, adopted rules limiting individual liberty, basically for one reason. Because when you have something new and something dangerous, even if you don't do nothing about what you should do against it, even if you don't know nothing, it's much better if you're a politician to do something. Because you can be destroyed if you respect your ignorance, if you look at, you observe, and you give the individuals the right to decide in a way or another way. And because if the situation after your decision improves, you can say, it improved because of my decision. Maybe not true, but it improved because obviously the diffusion of the virus are marked by some waves, etc. So it can be totally independent by your restrictions. But if after your restriction the situation improves, you can say, oh, it happened because I'm a good ruler, I'm a good politician. So and if the situation, on the contrary, instead to improve, become more better, you can say, oh, it was very good to do it differently. The situation could be even worse.
Yes.
So in any case,
so here comes political problem.
Yes.
Because if I don't do anything, so the people will be angry about me. Why don't you do anything?
This is exactly.
Even I don't know what to do. Even I'm a good politician. I don't want to take individual rights away.
Yeah.
I am forced by the people to do something.
Yes. When we are talking about a state of exception or a crisis in a general way, how we can define a crisis? How we can say we are in a state of exception? We decide we are in a state of exception, in a totally new situation, okay? And who decide about it? Politicians. But politicians have the interest to emphasize that we have in a very difficult situation. And politicians who call to have some expertise, some opinion about it. Other people totally interested to emphasize that the situation is dramatic. Because in Italy we used in these 3 years a very strange term, we use the term virus stars. So there are some stars not coming from cinema or theater, but from the hospitals. Because very quickly, some people before totally ignore, no one in Italy knew some professor coming from this department, but expert in what? Depends, in virus, epidemiology, or other sector of medicine, immediately became very, very known. And some of them now they are in the parliament, quite interesting. Other wrote a lot of books, very, very sold in Italy. Other are opinion maker in television. So if you ask to those people, you think that this situation is very dramatic or not? Obviously they will say yes. Because if the situation is dramatic, their role becomes very, very, very important.
Yes, I would like to say the same thing. Yes, because they feel themselves in higher conditions when they feel that they are important.
And not only it. My opinion is that virus exists, obviously, was spread everywhere, okay, and it was a very bad thing, but not so dangerous as they pretended it was. But it had a lot of bad consequences, in my opinion, because the bad policies adopted by the government. I give you this data. We know now that the virus was already in Italy in September 2019, because in some laboratories of special center in Italy concerning cancer and so on, they found that the virus was already there. in some Italian human beings in 2019. So September, October.
Maybe in Georgia too at the time.
Maybe
because
November.
I was in China in that same time.
December, January, 5 months before the alarm. And if you compare what happened in the hospitals, but especially the number of dead people in this month, if you compare with the other month, previous years, you cannot see the difference. So the virus was there. Some friends of mine were in hospital because they had some troubles, etc.
Yeah.
But you cannot perceive the consequence in the number of people dead in January, in December, November, etc. But when they started with the specific new rules about, you will perceive immediately the consequences.
Yes, and the people was killed not because of virus, but maybe because of panic, because of regulations, because of some like these things.
Because, for instance, in Italy, they started to say, doctors, family doctors, have to avoid to go to the family of the people because they can spread the virus. So instead to take care of these people, it was better to send these people in the hospital. And the hospital, they were full of people weak, so in this, for them, very dangerous, the virus. So we have a lot of consequences of
it. It's very important, and in the hospital are people infected by different of stamp of virus. So you are weak with your virus, and also you can catch up another stamp of virus, and you will be worse.
Yeah.
Certain.
So the first problem is that, in my opinion, some policies create a lot of troubles, a lot of problems, a lot of bad consequences. Second point, they start to modify the data. This is very important because there was a huge discussion in Italy about the fact if a guy was dead because COVID or with COVID. It's not the same thing. Everywhere we discuss about it. But they start to modify data. And if you talk with doctors in Italy, especially doctors working in hospital, it's obvious that if the average age of the people who died for COVID in Italy, the average age was 82, 81, it's obvious that they were there because they have a lot of other problems, but they were recorded as dead
because of COVID. Yes. So,
killed by COVID, but it was not true.
1 or 2 weeks ago, I saw some data about deaths by the country. It was analyzed by the year. How much was it increased deaths per year? Certainly, 2021 was increased in different countries, but best result was in Sweden.
Yes.
Least increased deaths in Sweden.
Yeah. And what is
so now think about what was better.
Yeah. So the country
not to regulate,
which decided to choose a different path. Yes. And what is, in my opinion, very important, what we discovered, unfortunately, in Italy, that we had a new thing, and you needed to know better what is the content of this COVID. And instead to say, okay, we have a lot of doctors, we have a lot of specialists, we need a discussion, a free research. We impede this kind of research, and we start deciding what was COVID, what was the just practice to adopt, etc., etc. And we had a kind of persecution in Italy of doctors deciding to adopt this cure or the other cure. And now we know that that solution were effective, in fact, but they had a lot of troubles with the former association of doctors. And many of them were suspended because the government claimed to have a special point of view, a special knowledge about the reality, and having this special knowledge start to attack all the people adopting a different solution, saying, "Oh no, it's very dangerous to."
Yes, there was censorship in the social media too.
Exactly.
If you write anything against these regulations and against vaccination,
I experienced it in my university, because when I was called by a part of my student to give my opinion in Piazza Brais, the main square in Verona, and my idea were reported by the local newspaper, I was attacked immediately by the director of my department, saying, "Oh, strange idea, Professor Lottieri is isolated, is not the opinion of the department." And I have a confrontation with him, but the idea, it was, you have to attack one in order to oblige, force all the other 1,000 to be silent. So we create a very strange situation. In my case, it was a problem of opinion about rights, etc. But it was the same for the scientists in the hospital, etc. It was very difficult to suggest a different solution, different from the solution offered by the government. And in this way, you cannot address disease and so on. If you don't have free research, if you don't have confrontation of theses, etc., we cannot progress. And in that situation, on the contrary, it was important to have a better knowledge.
I think it's important to remind to everyone now that it was wrong, every solution at the time. And also, I remember also few doctors also used to say that this virus should not be forced like this as it was, but as soon as they tell like these things afterwards, I never had the possibility to see them what they say next, because it was closed. All the lines they were to give us information about what was this COVID. But this COVID is like grippe and nothing else actual. Maybe cold. Yes, maybe a little bit worse, maybe not, but it's a virus.
Yeah.
Usual virus. Hard to say. But
another actor very important was obviously in this situation, I talk about Italy, was European Union. Obviously, European Union discovered a wonderful opportunity, because virus is not a national problem, it's a problem common. And in fact, later they decided that the contract with the main companies producing vaccine were not signed by the national state, by European Union. And not only European Union exploited the situation in order to increase its power over European people, but also international organization, WHO, became very, very important. They declared what was a pandemic, and they defined what was the guidelines to follow. And obviously, when you have a so strong concentration of power, never forgetting, for instance, that this international organization is funded by the states. US is the first one, China is the second, and by some foundation.
Yes, I remember
Bill Gates Foundation is the third contributor.
I remember Trump refused to fund this.
Yeah, exactly, because there was a tension between
it was
US.
A short period. No?
Yeah, exactly. There was a tension between Trump administration and this organization. So, if you consider that Bill Gates Foundation is the third contributor of this organization, and the contributor has obviously also the right to decide what can be the utilization of the money they give to this organization, you understand that we are in very, very strange situation. So you have this kind of formal control coming from very, very up, very, very far from us. We lose our possibility to express our ideas. Even at the national level, we are less and less able to adopt a policy or another policy. And What, in my opinion, is very, very clear during these 2 years is that we have realized more than in past that the growth of the political power has almost destroyed the possibility of a free economy and free culture. So in the past, as libertarians, we have a very simple idea, quite convincing, in my opinion. So one side we have the government, the power, but we have also free economy, the companies, the businessmen, and we have free intellectuals, we have newspapers, etc. And we can resist against the power because we have a free economy and free culture. But now we have on one side the oligarchs, so not real private companies, but companies we receive a lot of money from the government, we sign a lot of contracts with the government, we do money because there are restrictions pushing people to buy their product, and we have intelligentsia. I use this term oligarch in the sense of Moscow.
Every person who has had profit because of this situation,
exactly.
Their power is more now than it was before the COVID.
I give you only a simple example.
Not only governments,
yeah,
but also...
Exactly. Because people in the government need to have private companies in order to have their own money. They need this kind of pass. We don't know in Europe the real content in the document. We don't have the document of the contract between Pfizer and European Union.
Between?
Pfizer. Pfizer and European Union. It's secretized. Why? If you are in a free society, if you are using my money in order to buy the vaccine I have injected in my body, I want to look what is in this contract. I want to know how much you paid, and etc., etc. So we are in a very, very strange situation.
So you buy the injection from Euro Union, not from Pfizer? It's important point of view.
European Union bought from Pfizer and other companies.
So not from Pfizer. Person does not have the possibility, did not have possibility to buy directly from Pfizer.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. You couldn't. I did once the experiment. I went to a pharmacy and I asked a vaccine. No, we don't have in a pharmacy.
So
it was managed by the bureaucracy, by the state, but not Italy bought the vaccine from Pfizer, Moderna, and the other companies, but only European Union, and we don't know the contract.
I think that these companies, I'm Giandieri from New Economic School.
Everyone knows you already. Ask me.
To join the conversation, I think that I tried, by the way, myself, asking some insurance leaders here that if it was possible to negotiate with some Turkish companies that they could buy the vaccines directly from Turkish sources because they could have lower prices than in Georgia. And they said, no, it's not worth doing that because there can be prices very high. But who cares? Maybe I'm ready to pay 5,000 because I want to go to my children in the US, and without vaccination there, I'm not allowed. Why they are restricting? And the second thing, what we said also was that the choice was restricted so much for the people that you must have Moderna, not that one, or that, and like this. But it brings us to maybe higher level problems, like if we need more government in such kind of cases, or this was all wrong, because people were frightened so much that they thought that only big guys like government, even bigger guys like UN, only can deal with these kind of problems. And without this is such a huge issue that we cannot do this through insurance company or a healthcare company or ourselves paying for that. So, and this is the maybe one of the biggest mistakes. We went through the 20th century and we ended with lots of problems and continued in the 21st century that the government is the only solution to many things, like to just opposite to what Ronald Reagan was saying, that the government is not solution but it's a problem. And we faced in reality that the government was a problem, not a solution of all of this. Like we can recall so many funny stories what we had in Georgia and elsewhere with the government actions in the washing the streets and many this kind of absolutely.
For instance, in my city in Venice, for a while it was impeded, but not only in Venice, in all Italy, impeded to leave home after 10 in the afternoon, in the evening. My city is empty. no possibility to find someone in the street. So it was totally irrational. Totally irrational.
In Tbilisi, for instance, it was allowed to go to the supermarket during the daytime, but not in the night time. When there was nobody
in the street, exactly. Totally.
So you could go in the night and
totally irrational.
Meeting nobody there, but it was not allowed in the night.
I remember it was in Paris. In Paris, when you are sick, you could eliminate the mask, but when you are up, you have to put your mask. So probably they study the behavior of the virus. The virus is active when you are up and you are sit.
And by the way, you recall the mask, and mask issue was one of the most funniest and most strongest lesson from this crisis, that now world claims that we are sending the rockets to Mars and the moon and maybe even further than our galactics. And there is a problem of producing of masks, and somebody can think that everybody became crazy. Not just, we lost any understanding of the things. And if there was a need of masks, then there was enough absolutely capacity to provide the entire population of the world with masks in 1 week. But there's a panic, etc., and the governments were stealing masks from each other. This cannot be worse, it cannot be worse. And government is not a solution, that's what I'm saying. Of course, there are some doubts about if the masks were really efficient,
useful,
if it was helping you at all, etc. But on the other hand, there was such a funny understanding of the world, how it works, the economy or the entire world, that if there is a need of masks, then government should provide the masks. Why? And in Georgia we had lots of funny stories with the masks. The government paid money to some companies to produce very stupid masks, which were not really masks, but something to cover your face, nothing else. So, but all of these things are telling us a very important thing, that spite of the fears that the government increased now and its influence increased, and the satellites of the governments like cronies also have more power, then if our people wants and needs to find that this was totally wrong, there were so many lessons for that we should understand this was wrong, just wrong, and it's not good to do the same again if something happens again. We faced this, we understood this was wrong, and we don't need to do that again. Unfortunately, humans do the same sometimes, same mistakes.
I think the people will do same if it becomes same situation.
Because
it was also an experiment.
Maybe we are weak to explain to the people that government is not a solution, first of all, and the second thing that maybe we need to look at the best practices, like in Sweden, that despite of all claims, in Sweden no more people died than in Denmark when they.
About Sweden, it's very interesting because I'm sure that in Georgia, as in Italy, as everywhere, at the beginning there was a strong attention to Sweden because Sweden didn't want that lockdown, but later the main media stopped to talk about Sweden.
Yes, of course.
It's very interesting.
It was dangerous for them.
Because the data were against what I said before. Differently, no, it was a wonderful opportunity for the big media to say, look what happened in Sweden. No one after recalled that what happened in Sweden and the situation now in Sweden.
At the time, I remember many people said the Swedes what they think about. Would they like to die, all of them, or like these things?
So, by the way, the situation in Sweden was not really ideal. It's just that government did not oblige people doing this. But on the other hand, it was pushing them to have more distance, etc. For that reason, many Swedish businesses suffered and even suffering now because I was in Stockholm. And I could not fly from Stockholm to Berlin because of deficit of workers at the airport of Stockholm. That happened in many places, not only in Stockholm, but in Germany they invited, as I remember, thousands of Turkish workers for the airports of Germany because there was nobody to work there. In Georgia, many restaurants were closed down because people were sent back to their homes and they don't want to come back to the restaurants to work there anymore.
But what you did about the government as a solution or the problem is very, very important. Is the fundamental point. And in my opinion, the lesson coming from the pandemic is very, very useful because what happened, in fact, showed us what was the situation already before. Because unfortunately, we don't have anymore a real legal system in the strong sense of this term, legal system. Because the legal system, in my opinion, is a system of norms protecting the society, and these norms are based on natural law, the idea of justice, are based on customary law, so the law emerging from our behaviors, is based on spirit of association and contract, is based of doctrine, the idea that some lawyers study the principle of law, etc., etc., or common law is in the US. But we don't have anymore this legal system. Why?
All of them are
at the margin of the system. Because for us, unfortunately, law is the decision of the politicians. So the arbitrary decision of the politicians. So in this situation, obviously, we have lost almost all our rights because they are very, very weak. They have already lost. Because if I can take all your money because I can, taxation is perfectly legal, I can tax even 100%. If I can force you to stay at home, if we can impede you to express some ideas, etc. And we can now, if you are a politician, do it because every rule coming from the parliament is legal, and we don't have any more other type of rules. And we have destroyed this relation between society. We have already lost before the pandemic.
We have not only possibility, but not only rule, but we have not possibility to do something against it. If any politician decides to take more power in this or another segment, he will do it. He will find reason for it, and if he finds the reason, he will do it.
So very dangerous, of course, is the new type of understanding of the government by the people. They can think that this is exactly for what we have government, and it was already very big understanding before because people, even in the US, where it is very, very much restricted by the Constitution, there are so many things which are done by the government, federal government, for instance, and there are some people trying to protest this, that it is not written in the constitution why the government is taking those powers in their hands. But in Europe, and especially Georgia, where there is no real good tradition of understanding of what for you need constitution at all. So it was like only people by themselves who are feeling that they are free, they were trying to avoid this kind of situations. Otherwise, people who think that, oh, of course we have government for this, for what we have government, if not for this. Then any question like, but do you know if such kind of function is in our constitution at all? And if government has such a function or power to restrict you, to decide about masks and vaccines, etc., then who cares about this? This is the bad reality of this. When this can be stopped, if not such a big event, what can stop this trend that government is becoming bigger and bigger?
Yeah.
This is very important. For me, this is not really so tragic. I think that, yes, this situation gave us very bad things, but also very good evidence that the government failed not only here, but failed everywhere. Just everywhere, government failed everywhere.
But unfortunately, this is evident for you, but not for the large majority of people.
Yes, I
Absolutely
agree.
not.
Yes, but not because that they think that way, but they were told that way. The propaganda was very strong. I'll recall one of the most stupid things also in Georgia, that in around May of 2020, we celebrated that we had less COVID infections in Georgia, and entire center of Tbilisi, not maybe in the suburbs, was applauding to our medical workers that, oh, we were so good in our medical. And I was just saying that, why do you think that our medical people are better than Italians? Because in Italy it was a tragic situation by media reports, and I said that it's impossible. We don't have better healthcare system in Georgia than in Italy. It's just what we have done, and this was not the achievement of the healthcare system, because it was an achievement of, in reality, of the journalists who made a huge panic, and the panic was so strong that government decided that we need to just restrict everything. That's all. And the outcome of this was, if one wanted to understand, outcome was very clear that we stopped this for a while, and I remember the travelers who wanted to return back to Tbilisi, they were coming from Armenia, because Armenia was more flexible. And they were arriving to Yerevan airport and coming with the buses to Georgia, and crossing the border, and then arrested immediately and sent to the hospitals or the hotel somewhere. But Armenia had much more cases from the beginning, much more than Georgia. But then when we went forward, they had less and less and less, and then we had more and more and more. So did we succeed with this policy? Absolutely not, because we had many different cases which would never happen if we did not restrict our people. The same slogan, stay at home, was, I think, one of the worst thing we did in reality, because we went through and we had some kind of virus tested through the people. Maybe we would finish this very quickly, because it was not
And
really
psychological consequences.
Yes, yes, we were discussing this also, that staying at home was maybe very bad thing for many old people who could have lots of problems.
And also the emphasis on COVID was also a way to destroy the rest of the health system in many cases, because many people needing to have some cures about cancer or other disease didn't have during this period. It was almost impossible because all the hospitals were blocked, etc. And I think that a part of the increased number in the 2020-21 in comparison with the other years, partially is normal because in many countries we have a population older and older. So we are looking at a number of that people depend by the demographic system, not the country. Yes. But I think in part it was a cause also of the fact that if you destroy the health system because COVID or the other sector, obviously some people will die.
So I have a very important question, and we need to think, and I would like to hear about your opinion. What we should do, what should be done to be clear that government failed, as Gia said? What should be done? How can we present this situation to the society?
I think it's not easy because...
I understand it's not easy.
It's not easy because what Gia said before about the role of the newspapers, it's very interesting because it's an addendum what I said before about the relation between the government on one side and a large part of the economy, the crony economy, but larger and larger because the space of a free market economy is smaller and smaller, and intelligentsia.
What do you mean in the word intelligentsia?
Intelligentsia, I'm speaking about my colleagues in university.
Academic.
Who teach social
scientists, and journalists, and so on.
Carlo, sorry. I was reading also a very important and interesting thing that Friedrich von Hayek was warning us about the role of scientists in future. He was exactly talking about this thing, that the scientists are becoming so powerful politically, not just by their the research or something, but politically they are needed, and sometimes
they are useful for politicians.
So politicians,
and they are using the politician for their interest.
For the
this case was the demonstration of this.
At the beginning, the specialists were the theologians when the state emerged. Then the lawyers, because the king needed lawyers. Then the economists. They got very important. And now the scientists.
Oldest profession.
Because they have to explain, you have to use the money of the people in order to improve your economy, etc., etc. And now we are losing. So what can we do? I think we have to defend free market on one side and free opinion on the other side. So we have to create a parallel world. We have to create another economy and another culture. Because I'm quite realist about the present. The real economy, the large majority of the economy, is totally corrupted. And the large part of the culture is largely corrupted. It is very difficult to resist. The social pressure is terrible. I remember the case of a colleague of my university who was invited by national TV, a doctor from the University of Verona. It was when we started to use the vaccination, and he gave to the public in 2 minutes, very short opinion, his idea about the fact that for him it was not reasonable very young people with the children, because children don't have usually basically risk from COVID, and because we don't know exactly what can be the long-term consequences of this vaccine. We have very limited information about. For it, he was practically expulsed from my university. But even in this case, not important the fact that this guy was put out of the university, but the message which arrived to all my colleagues, and not only, also in other universities. And never forgetting that...
Not official, but social press.
Exactly. In Italy we have a very known philosopher, probably this Italian most known philosopher in the world is Giorgio Agamben. When you go to Paris, FNAC library, you can find, I don't know, 10, 20 books translated in French, the same in London, and so on. He started to be critical against the decision coming from the government, and not only in Italy, but everywhere. It was destroyed. His image was destroyed. I remember when 3 months ago, in Stanford University, some student wanted to organize a seminar on the idea of this philosopher. And this philosopher is a philosopher coming from typical European tradition, Marxist idea mixed with Schmitt, mixed with Walter Benjamin and Michel Foucault, etc., etc. And because they wanted to organize this seminar was stopped. It was impeded to the student to discuss the idea of this guy. So the social pressure is very, very strong. So we have to create a kind of alternative world in the economy and the culture. We don't have alternative.
Like John Gold did.
Yeah, another world, another world.
Yes, I have same things about, but how can it be done in reality? It's hard question. I thought about old Greeks, they had like this system. Yes,
we have to create
free people and also people who are not free.
We are in Georgia, no? And you had this terrible experience of the Soviet Union. In the Soviet Union time, there was a wonderful literature called Samizdat.
Yeah, it was.
It was a kind of black market of the ideas. We need it. We need it for the ideas, and we need it for also for the merchandise, for the stuff, or for the rest. We have to create a real market of the ideas, of the activities, because the official world is totally corrupted. This is my opinion now. Totally corrupted. No way to change the situation. It's so strong. It's so evident that it's possible for us to change.
And
I think that.
And propaganda does it worse and worse every day.
We will see, we will see. Even Samizdat at the end, no? Was successful in some way because it started to, with decent ideas, to destroy pillars of the regime. And we have to do the same work. We have to criticize our situation, but we have to know that the system is strong, very, very strong. And we don't have, unfortunately, on our side, we don't have the businessmen. Only a few part of them. Large part of or the intellectual, even less the intellectual than the businessman. To my colleague, I'd say many times in Italy that I am very lucky that we don't live in a society where only the university professor vote. Differently, Italy will be a kind of Cambodia of the Khmer Rouge with Pol Pot or something similar. Because the ideas of the intellectual are terrible.
Yeah, I think that one of the major fundamentals for current political world, this is the emotion of ordinary people, that they employ the emotions very well. I'll bring you one example, how Georgia was converted into the public healthcare situation. That before 2013, our system was partially public because only teachers and pensioners were receiving state support in, healthcare.
Yeah.
And it was not ideal, of course, but for pensioners, this was in reality the continuation of their pension.
Yeah.
And for the teachers, public school teachers, this was the same, maybe the continuation of their additional to their salaries. And all others could have their private insurance, and it was developing very quickly. I know from the insurance companies who were not really in love in that government, that they were accused of investors, foreign investors, to invest in hospitals and clinics in Georgia. But then there was an emotion that that time opposition and now government people were talking such an emotional language that we have such a system of healthcare where people are dying in the streets. And it's very powerful emotion. People can think that really poor people, because of they don't have money, they are dying in the street because they cannot have healthcare. So now we have the system which is that government is covering everybody except the insurance private people like I and Nodar and Lasha. Maybe we are out of the system, but the others are in the system. The queues are there and the waste of money is there, etc. But the system is moving towards what? That in nearest time we can receive the situation that there are no incentives for innovation or implementing new technologies and buying new technologies and buying the needed spare parts for the old technologies also. And this means that we can lose the doctors who are addicted to new technologies and they go to Italy or other places instead. So the outcome, the real outcome of this situation will be that people will be dying because there is no healthcare anymore.
What you did about the emotion is very, very important. For instance, during the pandemic, people as me opposing these policies try to use this kind of rhetoric because emotion is the fact that we have some ideas, we have to present this idea in a very effective way, so use also the emotion in order to persuade people. And it was very easy, in fact, and the people opposing these pandemic policies had some followers. Why? Because, for instance, many people were forced to lose the job because they, for many reasons, sometimes for health reasons, other because for principal reasons, etc., they rejected vaccination. But without the pass, the health pass, it was impossible to work. If you didn't have this pass, you were forced to. And so we start to talk about a society divided into two parts. There were the normal people, and then there were the excluded. So we have to emphasize all the tragic consequences of this kind of control, plan, and interventionism, and so on. Yeah. So we have to improve our ability to present our idea. But even about the COVID, under some aspect, if you, also in the case you are not a specialist, and if you are a specialist, you don't know all about the COVID, anyway, you can understand what they said was totally absurd. Because if you put all the declaration they did, and you consider how many times they were in contradiction, you understand that they were liars.
Yeah, because...
And totally unprofessional.
But no one wants to think.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it is explainable, by the way. I'm not saying this is correct, absolutely incorrect, but it is explainable. Because they were under pressure of the politics and pressure of social media and other media also. And
they are also following their interest.
They wanted to show that we are doing something. And they are talking wrong things because they needed to talk something, because people were waiting for...
But a serious scientist could say, I don't know.
Yeah, but...
This is the real answer.
Politician cannot say this.
Okay, but a serious politician can say, I have this doctor, and this very important doctor, and the real answer is, I don't know.
Yeah, but I wanted to say something also very briefly about the economic crisis which followed this situation. Unfortunately, of course, big thing was politicization of everything, etc. But then there were some strange voices everywhere, like to punish China, and etc. But in Georgia, there were discussions about that government needed to put more money in the economy and such kind of things, and nobody was thinking about that. Now the solution is entrepreneurship. Is what I wrote about, is that they simply don't understand what that means. This is the reality. The entrepreneur, who are the entrepreneurs? Those guys who wake up in the morning and hey, yesterday they were talking about masks, and I will bring now 100,000 masks because there is a demand for that. Instead of this, they think, oh, entrepreneurs, these are just guys who want to make profit and they are not interested in masks. Of course, they are interested in anything what the people need.
Yes, but the entrepreneurship
is the wrong understanding of the world.
A free space. For
Yes,
instance,
yes,
there is this disease. An entrepreneur can say, I have to find doctors or specialists suggesting correct cures. But if you don't have the possibility to suggest cures because you have this state system saying and imposing what are the correct solution of this problem, you don't have this space.
In addition, there is one more thing. Initiative. That if you think that, okay, there is a demand, I can bring the vaccine or something like this. But then you think that, yes, but they are going to give the vaccines for free to everybody. And so what would I buy this? Then they are...
But even the vaccine was considered by the government and by the companies and by the intelligentsia linked to the government as the solution. In the market, you don't have any more the solution. We have many solutions emerging and competing.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, and we didn't have this possibility. Why in Italy many doctors had a lot of problems with the government and with the association? Because they try to suggest some cures, some different solutions, different from the solution imposed by the government. But there is no only one solution, it depends by the situation, no?
And the best solutions are coming through competition. No?
And one of the tragic problems
from competition.
Our time was the alliance between science and power. Big law, but you are only decision, comments coming from the power. Rules imposed by the power are not legal rules, are only decision of the owner of the society. It's something different, I insist. Because we are in this situation, the real problem is we don't have any more civil society, free economy, and free culture. We have to work for it. This is the main problem, and I think we have the same problem in US, in Europe, in Georgia, in Africa, everywhere. Because never forgetting that our world is largely periphery on something happened, I don't know where, but there are some message coming from there and repeated in some way in Europe, here, in other part of the world. And the last argument may be very interesting. What we experienced also in this free age is a system of control. So in Italy we had this pass, we called it in English green pass. It was a kind of health passport. A first tentative, in my opinion, to introduce in some Western society a Chinese system, a credit social system. So we had in the past the idea, because human beings to be free and by consequence to have some individual rights, and we are moving to a society when there are some people, some companies, some scientists, etc., deciding when we can have a title to have some right or not. And this is very, very dramatic because the technologies are very useful for ready to give to the power the possibility to change radically our society. And what happened for the cash, for instance, very, very important. During the crisis in Canada, do you remember when there was a strike of the truck workers? A minister said to the people, we know who you are, yes, and never forget that we can close immediately your bank account. Immediately. And when you don't have anymore your bank account...
Big Brother controls everything, exactly, like this.
The Big Brother is very, very close to us. Yes. This is the problem.
There is one big thing, I think, it is that individuals cannot feel themselves safe now anymore. Yeah. Because majority decided and you cannot oppose anyhow. You cannot run away because where you can run? To the moon, or where can you run? Because the majority decided that you should have masks, you should have vaccines, you should have taxis, you should have that, you should have that, and then you cannot just oppose to this. There is no chance, and there is no limitation. What you said about the technologies, I was recently talking about the same, that technologies are things which are mostly very expensive, and sometimes you want to have, for instance, antivirus in your phone. It's costly. That means that anybody in the government, hired hacker, for instance, by the government, can look in your phone and steal every information you have, etc. And you have no chance to oppose to this, because they have money, they have technologies, that means, and they can do everything they like with.
And they can use also the big companies. You read, imagine what happened with Twitter and the relation between Twitter and the government, CIA, FBI, etc. The weekly meeting between the guys from the government and Twitter, etc. And they can control our life. And we are a very, very, I think, dramatic situation. It's not a good time for individual liberty. This is my opinion.
So to finish our meeting,
conversation,
I would like to say, yes, I would like to say that we are here, and also not only we, some other peoples who are free-minded peoples, we should find a way how to exit from this circumstance.
Exactly.
We need to think more and to discuss these questions.
Exactly.
And I hope there is some exit somewhere.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so now I say also one more time, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you to you for this opportunity.
And I will say a few words in Georgian now. Პატრიციული მაყურებლებო, ჩვენი სტუმარი იყო კარლო ლოტერი, ვერონას უნივერსიტეტის პროფესორი. იმედია თქვენ მოგიწონათ მასთან გადაცემა. გადაცემა მიყავდა მე ნოდარ ჩინჩალაძეს, მეხმარებოდა გია ჯანდიერი, კამერის უკან ლაშა ჩინჩალაძე. მადლობთ ყურადღებისათვის.